people like you, we're all dedicated to trying to build democracy from below. But the elites who we're talking about have an opposite goal, naturally, that they want to undermine democracy from above. And that's perfectly natural, and it's general, shouldn't be surprising. The U.S. may be a little different from similar societies in this respect. It is unusual in the strength of business rule. The United States happens to have a highly class-conscious business community, which is committed to fighting a continuous and very bitter class war. They're not secret about it. Read it in business publications. They're concerned with what they call the hazard-facing industrialists and the rising political power of the masses. And they have to crush that somehow. And there are many ways. At one extreme, just violence. The United States has an unusually violent labor history in comparative terms, compared with similar societies. The softer end, there are things like the commitments of the public relations industry, fabricating consumers, directing people to the what are called the superficial things of life, like fashionable consumption and debt traps and other devices. And there's a wide range of devices. They're used with dedication, consciousness, a kind of a vulgar Marxism, just values inverted. And that's a good part of our history up to the present. Well, let's turn to the Obama administration and what we can learn from it about the question when elites fail. Well, from one point of view, they have failed dramatically. The two major foci of these discussions are illustrations, the financial and the environmental failure. And that's pretty serious. And it does, as Smith pointed out, have a grievous effect on others here in the United States and the other rich countries, but much worse in the countries that are subject to the savage injustice of the Europeans, South suffering much more as usual. Not all of it, the metaphoric South outside the West. East Asia has been pretty much immune, but that's because they protected themselves from the neoliberal doctrines of the past 30 years, and hence they've survived much better. And to an extent, that's beginning to happen in Latin America, one of the most important developments in the world at this time. I try to say something about it, but they're beginning to extricate themselves from this system. But the picture is pretty general and not surprising. Well, let's consider, I'll just keep to the effects at home. For the population, it's grievous, but I don't have to go through the details because you know all about it. There's a good, but what about the principal architects of policy? How are they making out? Well, they're making out like bandits. It's described very frankly in the business press. The business press is a very good source of information, has good reporting, for one reason, because their audience has to have a tolerably realistic picture of the world that they own, so you get pretty accurate reporting, and also because they trust their audience, so you don't have to feed them ideological claptrap. So you often get a pretty straight and accurate picture. And so let's start with Business Week. In early August, they had an issue with a big front page cover that had big letters said, "The health insurers have already won." That was August 6th. They were exulting. The battle over health care is over. They won, and they're very happy about it. And that's correct. They got virtually everything they want, the insurers. They're getting universal coverage or something like it, which means more customers, government subsidies, virtually no regulation, no public option, still being talked about, but everyone in the know agrees it's not going to happen. So it's as if they wrote the bill, and it's not as if they pretty much did write the bill. So yes, the health insurers have won. So I'm very happy. What about the public? Well, the public has opinions, but here's where the democratic deficit becomes so significant. Madison, Bernays, Lippmann, and others are correct. For decades, there have been polls among the public about what they want done with health care. Large majorities, pretty consistently, are in favor of some kind of national health care system of the kind that every other industrial country has, and many others. But that's not even on the agenda. It's occasionally mentioned. When it's mentioned, it's called politically impossible or lacking political support, which is accurate, in fact. It lacks support from the principal architects of policy, the financial institutions, the pharmaceutical industries, and so on, so it's not politically possible and not on the agenda. What about public option? Well, that, which is a pretty minor aspect of it. The public, on that, the most recent polls about a week ago, it's still about 2 to 1 in favor by the public, but it's finished. It's not going to happen. What about drug prices? They're about twice as high here as in the rest of the world, and a pretty simple reason for it. This is the only country where the government is barred by law from using its purchasing power to negotiate drug prices. 85% of the public's in favor of using that power, but it's off. There was a front page story in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago saying Obama has made a secret deal with the drug companies, ensuring them that there won't be any effort to negotiate drug prices. Pretty big democratic deficit, 85% in this case. The numbers, incidentally, are misleading. If these issues were ever discussed, they're not, you know. Then, and if people didn't feel isolated and alone and giving these opinions, the numbers would almost surely be much higher. But even with no discussion and just total either ignoring it or condemnation across the board, the figures stay pretty stable. And that's true on many other issues too. It's been studied well. Well, this is an enormous elite success. Incidentally, as you know, there's a lot of talk about cost control. You got to keep the cost of the health reform under that magic number of $1 trillion. But most of the discussion is completely ridiculous. If the public will were honored, there wouldn't be any cost problem. The cost would be going down. So the costs of drugs would be going down, as they are in the Veterans Administration, for example, where the government does have the power to negotiate prices. And if you got rid of the insurance companies or tightly regulated them, as is done in some European countries, that'd be enormous cost savings. But that doesn't matter. That's only what the public wants. And it's not what the principal architects of policy want, and what they've gotten in a pretty dramatic illustration of the accuracy of Adam Smith's observation 250 years ago. Of course, there's a potential downside, and the business press is quite aware of it, and the business world. It's going to tank the economy. Take a look at the escalation of medical costs. You know, it's going to overwhelm the economy. But that's not an issue either, just as the public will is not an issue. And it's not because they're bad people or anything. These are just institutional imperatives. If a person's functioning in those institutions and does care about what's going to happen, say, to their grandchildren, they're out. They can't participate. The structure of the institutions is such that you must be concerned with achieving the goals of the principal architects of policy, short-term gain, profit, and power. Otherwise, you're out. So it's institutional fact.